So in the previous example, we just simply integrated the jar file into a run script, this time using Jython, which simply allowed us to access the library in execution. And then in the actual code, all we have to do is reference the method that's in Java, and it will make the Jython or Java Python integration work quite seamlessly. Now in a more complex example, if you go to frame, so now we're actually going to do the example that I talked about earlier. If you go to frame and then go to the main module, you will see that there's a main argument. So main is often used as the main, well, I guess as the method that launches an application in Java. So main is a typical method name for that. We're referencing it here in the launch. So again, we sort of create this in a similar fashion as we would as a Python application. It is basically a Python application. So main is referenced here. You can see we're getting this time the system arguments. Remember from previous weeks, you can get system arguments by doing sys system.argv. So system is a library we can import. So sys we import. You could of course name it, or you have to name it system sys. So that's the system that you're using to get the arguments. You could change the name if you want to, but it's not really relevant. But in this case, it's just system.argument or argv. Okay, we also are importing this parser. This is an option parser that's coming, which allows us to basically parse different system arguments. Just it's again something that's built in. Hopefully, you should be able to apply it or use it. Just reference it as you see here. So as we import the option parser, or from the option parser, I should say, we're going to import the specific class option parser. So opt parse is the name of the library, and from that we get option parser. So option parser is nothing more than a kind of class and part of a larger library that allows you to parse data from your system arguments. You can see that we're using it here, and it's going to add different options like UI, and it's going to sort of reference them in some way, which will tell us what kind of code that we'll be using. So I'll explain all this in a moment, but just to show you what's going on here. And it's adding other options that include language. So lang, so --UI means user interface, --lang is language. And these are the languages which you can do different kinds of applications. The default one being English, EN, and default option as well being the console. So what's that all referring to is that this application basically allows you to create different ways in which you can take text and use voice information, or use voice as a way to talk out that text. Or you can use potentially a Java frame, or you can output it to the system console. So you could take a text such as "Hello, my name is," whatever your name is, and then either say it as a voice, output it in some kind of user interface, or indicate it in the console that you see down here. Okay, so how does that all done? So this is the actual parser up here, which is nothing at this point. Only it's adding those options through language, user interface, and then basically parsing the argument that you give it. So it's setting up our way to use a kind of set of tools to allow us to do these kinds of ways of vocalizing or displaying the text in some way. The actual magic is being done mostly in these other modules, speech, window, console, which are the options that I mentioned. You can see all of them have this kind of referencing that's using this @ symbol. So it's something, a kind of symbol that's used to basically reference files that get dynamically loaded, or loaded, I should say. So it's reference to different methods or modules that are loaded into Python, so they can be applied. So it's a kind of sort of trick to basically allow us to reference the user inputs from the system to the specific Python code. So we could actually control the methods that are being launched using nothing more than system arguments text. And so I'll show you what that means, I guess, now. So if I go to launch, I can say run configurations ... to set up the run configurations. And here in Jython run, once again, I can create a new run just like before. And I've already created it, so I'm going to go to it and show you what it means. So if I go to main, .python, you can see once again, because I've already referenced the libraries, those should be all loaded in. So now we have all the libraries we need. In the arguments area, you'll see that what happens is, what this requires is, one, the first line needs to be your name, and then after that you have to tell it what kind of user interface you require. So in this case I'm going to say speech. So remember, UI was the user interface that it's asking for, and the user interfaces relate to a speech, a window, or a console kind of output. Okay, and the language as well as what language you want to output your information. So in this case, English, we'll just keep it at EN. So we just say dash dash. So that has to be into the program arguments. If you're using Windows, you may actually have to use dash D Java input in the VM argument. That's due to the console, of course, parsing data a little bit differently. I've showed you the text for that in the week 4 reference on Moodle. So if you go to week 4, you'll see how you actually write that out if you're using Windows. But you shouldn't generally need it if you're using other operating systems. In any case, this allows us then to create the user interface as well as the language in the program arguments. So we'll need to add that into our program arguments. The interpreter is the default interpreter, and the rest of the information is going to be the same as before. So the main thing is, again, we're using Jython instead of the Python run. And this time, because we're using an application that requires inputs from the system arguments, we need to add something like this. You can put your own name if you want, of course, at the very top. And so what's going to happen is it runs through those options, looks at the name, and then it's going to apply different kinds of set of options, referencing the Python modules that are created here. So when you put something like speech, for instance, in the second argument that I showed you earlier under main, so there you'll see that I put speech as the user interface. And so speech is really nothing more than a textual reference to a module called speech. And so how does it know it's speech? That speech that I put in the system argument is the same as the module called speech. It's through this referencing that's used, the @ symbol. So it's called register under UI. So it's registering this specific module with the text input in the system argument. So that's how it's going to know to use speech.